When you eat fiber-rich foods, your body actually cannot directly digest most of them, but that is exactly what makes it interesting, because some of fiber's most important effects appear not when we process it, but when the bacteria in our intestines process it. In other words, fiber is not just a substance that keeps the bowels moving, it is also a nutritional component that affects what the gut ecosystem produces. In this video, we will talk about what happens when fiber reaches the intestines, how bacteria play a role in this process, and which areas this is associated with, from digestion to immunity. First, let's clarify what we mean by fiber. Dietary fiber refers to carbohydrate-like structures found in plant-based foods that cannot be completely broken down and absorbed in our small intestine. Vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, nuts, and seeds contain different amounts of fiber. Fiber is generally described in two main groups: soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. Soluble fiber can form a gel-like structure when it comes into contact with water. This may slow down digestion and show some effects associated with blood sugar or cholesterol metabolism. Insoluble fiber does not dissolve in water. It can support bowel movements by adding bulk to stool. For example, a bowl of lentil soup is not just a protein-rich meal, it also contains different types of fiber that can reach the intestines. An apple is not only a source of vitamins. When eaten with its peel, it also contributes to fiber intake. Oats, whole grain bread, chickpeas, beans, vegetables, and nuts are also common sources of fiber in daily life. In this video, we will not rank which fiber is the best. Instead, we will look at three things. First, what does fiber physically do in the intestine? Second, what do gut bacteria produce when they encounter fiber? Third, how are these processes associated with immunity, metabolism, and long-term health? When you eat a fiber-rich food, the process begins in the mouth. Chewing breaks the food into smaller pieces. When it goes down into the stomach, the food mixes with acid and enzymes. Then it moves into the small intestine. Proteins, fats, and many carbohydrates are broken down and absorbed here. But a significant part of fiber cannot be completely broken down by human digestive enzymes. That is why part of the fiber reaches the large intestine. So why does this happen? Because the chemical structure of fiber is built with bonds that human enzymes cannot easily cut. This is where insoluble fibers may play an important role. These fibers can support the movement of intestinal contents by holding water and adding bulk to stool. For this reason, fiber intake is frequently included in general recommendations, especially regarding constipation. However, this effect may vary depending on the type of fiber, fluid intake, and the person's intestinal sensitivity. With soluble fibers, the picture is a little different. Some of them form a gel-like structure when combined with water. This gel may slow stomach emptying and the rate at which nutrients are absorbed. That is why soluble fibers have been associated in some studies with satiety, blood sugar fluctuations, and cholesterol levels. We can think of this through daily life like this. When oatmeal or chia seeds come in contact with water, they take on a thicker, gel-like consistency. This is a good example of how soluble fibers interact with water. On the other hand, vegetable peels, whole grains, or the fibers in some legumes may contribute to stool bulk. In other words, different foods can behave in different ways in the intestine. But the truly interesting part of fiber begins here, because when it reaches the large intestine, fiber is no longer just food residue. It can turn into fuel for gut bacteria. The large intestine is not just a passive tube through which digestive waste passes. Here, there is a complex ecosystem made up of trillions of microorganisms. This ecosystem is called the gut microbiota. Some types of fiber, especially fermentable fibers, can be broken down by gut bacteria. Human cells cannot digest these fibers directly, but some bacteria can use them as an energy source. This process is called fermentation. In everyday language, we think of fermentation through yogurt, pickles, or sourdough. In the gut, in a similar logic, microorganisms transform some nutritional components. Fermentable fibers reach the large intestine. Certain gut bacteria break down these fibers. compounds called short-chain fatty acids are produced. The best known of these short-chain fatty acids are acetate, propionate, and butyrate. Butyrate in particular is described as an important energy source for colon cells. The important point here is this: fiber may serve as a resource for gut bacteria first, rather than directly giving energy to us. Bacteria then transform this resource into different compounds. These compounds can interact with cells in the intestinal wall, immune cells, and some metabolic signals. That is why the effect of fiber is not just keeping the bowels moving. Fiber can also affect which substances the gut ecosystem is able to produce. But this process is not the same for everyone, because everyone's microbiota is not the same. When two people eat the same amount of fiber, the short-chain fatty acids produced may differ because the composition of their gut bacteria is different. For this reason, saying fiber is beneficial may be correct within a general scientific framework, but saying every fiber has the same effect in everyone would be too definite. So, do the substances produced by bacteria remain only in the intestine, or can they also be associated with the body's broader systems? We can think of the intestinal wall as a very thin but selective security gate. It allows useful molecules from food to pass through, but it tries to limit the uncontrolled passage of potentially harmful substances into the body. It is also one of the largest contact surfaces between the outside world and our body. This is where fiber and short-chain fatty acids come into play. When the gut barrier works well, the boundary between intestinal contents and body tissues may be more controlled. This is also one of the areas of research associated with general inflammation processes, but it would not be correct to describe these mechanisms directly as fiber prevents this disease. At this point, the effect of fiber does not seem limited only to digestion. Research related to satiety, blood sugar response, and long-term metabolic health also comes into play here. The effects of fiber begin in the gut, but they may not remain only in the gut. When soluble fibers combine with water, they can form a gel-like structure. This structure may slow stomach emptying and the rate at which nutrients are absorbed. For this reason, some types of fiber may contribute to a more balanced rise in blood sugar after a meal, a longer feeling of fullness, and some processes related to cholesterol metabolism. For example, eating only a sugary snack may not create the same effect as eating a snack that contains yogurt, oats, and fruit. A fiber-containing meal may contribute to slower digestion and a longer-lasting feeling of fullness. This does not happen at the same level for everyone, but it is one of the reasons fiber-rich foods are associated with satiety. Also, most fiber-rich foods are not made up of fiber alone. Legumes may contain protein, minerals, and resistant starch. Whole grains may provide B vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals. Vegetables and fruits contain polyphenols and micronutrients. That is why, when fiber-rich eating is associated with positive health outcomes in a study, the effect may not come only from fiber. The overall dietary pattern is also important. Still, in broad areas of research, fiber intake is studied as an important nutritional component associated with cardiovascular health, type 2 diabetes risk, weight management, and some types of cancer. The World Cancer Research Fund reports strong evidence for a reduction in colorectal cancer risk associated with whole grains and foods containing fiber. So, is more fiber always better? No, it is not that simple. For example, if someone who normally consumes very few legumes suddenly starts eating large portions of lentils, chickpeas, or beans, they may experience gas and bloating. This does not always mean that fiber is harmful. Sometimes gut bacteria are trying to adapt to the newly increased amount of fiber. For this reason, trying to reach the target all at once may not be the right approach. Someone who wants to increase fiber intake should do this gradually over several weeks, not within a few days. Fluid intake is also important, because, especially with fibers that increase stool bulk, if enough fluid is not consumed, discomfort may occur instead of the expected relief. There are a few very common but incomplete ideas about fiber. The first one is this: fiber is only for constipation. Actually, this focuses on only one of fiber's most visible effects. However, fiber is also associated with gut bacteria, short-chain fatty acids, and metabolic responses. The second misconception is fiber supplements are the same as fiber-rich foods. Some fiber supplements may be useful in certain situations. However, natural sources of fiber usually contain vitamins, minerals, polyphenols, and different types of fiber together. Therefore, a single powder product and fiber from a variety of plant-based foods do not create the same nutritional context. For example, a fiber powder may provide a certain type of fiber, but a plate of vegetables or a portion of legumes does not contain only fiber. It also provides vitamins, minerals, polyphenols, resistant starch, and different nutritional components. That is why natural sources of fiber usually offer a broader nutritional package. The third misconception is, if gas and bloating occur, fiber is harmful. Not always. When fiber intake is increased rapidly, gut bacteria may carry out more fermentation and gas may form. In some people, this may be part of a temporary adaptation process, but in cases of severe, persistent symptoms that affect daily life, professional evaluation is necessary. The fourth point is scientific uncertainty. Microbiota research is developing rapidly, but it is still difficult to fully predict individual responses. The same type of fiber may feed different bacterial groups in different people. That is why saying there is one ideal fiber plan for everyone would be too ambitious for now. The strongest areas of evidence are these: the relationship between fiber and stool bulk and bowel regularity, the connection between fermentable fibers and short-chain fatty acid production, and the association between fiber-rich dietary patterns and some long-term health indicators. The weaker or more easily exaggerated areas are these: the claim that fiber alone will prevent every disease, the idea that it will completely fix the microbiota in a few days, and the assumption that the same type of fiber is ideal for everyone. In summary, fiber is not just a simple substance that keeps the bowels moving. Some add bulk to stool, some hold water and affect the speed of digestion, some are fermented by gut bacteria and contribute to the production of compounds such as short-chain fatty acids. That is why it is difficult to compress the effect of fiber into a single sentence. Fiber is an important nutritional component evaluated at physical, microbial, and metabolic levels. But the key word here is balance. More fiber does not always mean better. The amount of fiber, the type of fiber, water consumption, and the person's intestinal sensitivity should be considered together. So where does most of the fiber in your daily diet come from? Vegetables, fruits, legumes, or whole grains? Write it in the comments. This can be a good starting point for many of us to become aware of our eating habits. If you enjoy this kind of scientific and understandable health content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.